here today. Appreciate everybody coming and being part of the process. Halfway through the session, finally, right? We're grateful for that. We love the fact that Utah only has a 45-day session, shortest in the nation, and we're halfway through it. So, I want to talk about, let's talk appropriations really quick. You guys know appropriations subcommittees have finalized or in the process of finalizing, and everything's now being turned over to the Executive Appropriations Committee. So now Executive Appropriations Committee will take the work that the Sub-Appropriations Committee did. I want to point out, Utah's unique. I think we're the only state in the nation. If we're not the only state, we are one of the only states in the nation that have every member of the legislature sits on an appropriations committee, and every member of the legislature has input on what our state budget looks like. And I think that's one of the reasons why Utah is known as one of the best and most fiscally managed states in the nation, is because of that process. So we're very proud of that process. We have one of our appropriations chairs joining us here with us today, Chair of Higher Education. And let's start into that. Education. You guys know that education was a top priority for the House of Representatives this year. Not just higher education, but as well as K through 12. And now that we've started through the process, we've got some great bills out there. Representative Karen Peterson's one of them. You know that higher education, we've been a little bit concerned about that over the last several years and the direction that they're headed. So we've worked really hard to work collaboratively with our Board of Higher Education, as well as our university presidents, to come up with a plan that what works and does what is best for our students long term and for the state as a whole. And so I'm really proud of the work that Representative Peterson and Senator Milner in the Senate have done to get us to where we're at today. And so we'll turn the time over to Representative Karen Peterson to talk about her bill and higher education, and what the goals are, and how she's worked collaboratively with everybody to get that bill into a good spot. So, Representative Peterson.
Thank you. So House Bill 265, Higher Education Strategic Reinvestment, it passed the House last week with bipartisan support. So it's a bill that we've worked collaboratively on for months with our institution presidents, with our Board of Higher Education, with our Commissioner's Office, and with also industry, people that are concerned about workforce needs and opportunities for students. So we're really excited about where the bill's at. It's going to be heard the first thing next week in the Senate committee, and we'll start through the Senate process. So just a couple quick highlights on things that the bill does and why they're important. The first thing that it does is, $60 million was moved from each, in total, from each of the education institutions' budgets into a strategic reinvestment account. And our hope and goal is that all of those funds will go back into reinvestment in high impact and high demand programs for students. We want all those programs to be aligned with workforce opportunities and economic opportunities for students. And we want to make sure that students that are paying a lot of money in tuition and spending 4 years in our institutions come out with an economic benefit that will benefit them for the rest of their life. We have a great higher education system in Utah. Really fantastic programs, really fantastic opportunities for our students. But we can do more to make sure that those opportunities really are aligned with economic opportunities. So the institutions will be looking at their budgets, they'll be looking at their administrative costs, they'll be looking at how many people do we just have working here and how many people are serving students. And they'll be looking at programs that maybe have low enrollment, that no longer align with workforce needs, and figuring out how they can collapse some of those programs over the next 3 years, making sure students that are in those programs right now can have the opportunity to finish. We don't want to pull the rug out under any student that's already working towards a specific degree. But then working to get students into programs that really do have high demand and high need. And those range from everything from STEM programs, the ones you kind of always think of, engineering, computer science, things like that, but also some of our arts and humanities programs that our students are graduating with 6-figure incomes. Those are also really valuable and really important to our state. So one thing I want to make sure I always say is that, you know, when we talk about bachelor's degree programs, they still are bachelor degree programs, which means they require the breadth and depth of a bachelor's degree. So students are still getting a broad range of experience, but they're also getting the technical and durable skills that they need to be successful in the marketplace. So I met with Chambers of Commerce this morning, and that was the number one thing they said to me is we need a prepared workforce, and that's going to keep Utah strong. We want to do that for Utah students and Utah families. So that's the most important part of the bill. There's a few other small things we do in there, looking at performance funding, how we fund higher education, to make sure we're really focused on outcomes in higher education. We're working the next year to kind of look at those outcome metrics to make sure they really are aligned with the different institutions and their different missions in the system.
So I just want to add, one of the top priorities is bending the cost curve on tuition, right? I mean, tuition spikes have increased significantly. The state of Utah has stayed well below the national trend because we have funded our higher ed universities to such a high cost. So, but we can't continue doing that moving forward. And so it's important that we take a look into what is the money being spent on. The administrative costs, some of our higher ed institutions, 143% increased in just administrative costs on a per student basis over a 9-year period of time. That's way too high. And so looking to bring those costs down, which then can be passed on to the students through whether, you know, I doubt nobody's here to say we're going to have tuition cost decreases, but hopefully we can flatten out the cost of our higher ed in order to get a degree. That's one of the main goals in this as well. So we'll open that up to just questions in just a minute. And so I want to talk about also our Calais campus bill, the one that I'm running in the House, and career technical education and CTE. You know, for decades, CTE's kind of been left behind. Technical education has been left behind because the money has been chosen to be spent in other areas where there's, you know, in many cases, a higher need. Well, it's time we need to refocus some of those resources and put a bigger emphasis on career technical education. And I'll tell you, as I've had the opportunity to go visit so many schools over the last 2 years, and I go and visit a lot of high schools all around the state, I get to go and talk to those CTE teachers and talk to those students. And every time I go there, they talk about the need, they talk about the kids that come into these programs, they're excited, and that they don't have enough opportunities. And then the teachers talk about we don't have enough funding to meet the needs. And so when I had the opportunity to visit Davis Catalyst Center in Davis County School District, I was blown away what they've accomplished and the programs that they put together. It was so exciting. I you know, walked into the school. I didn't see kids on their phones. I saw kids engaged. I saw them engaged in a group effort, in a group setting, working on projects collaboratively to solve problems. So not as only teaching them technical skills, it's teaching them the skills that they need to have to be successful in the workforce. And that's what got me so excited about this program. That's why you see this bill a little bit tailor fit to encourage more of those types of programs and those types of collaboration. And so you couple that with Representative Peterson and Senator Milner's first credential bill, and then couple that with what we're working on, Representative Peterson's working on higher education. And really, we have a unique opportunity to lead the nation to reform and do some things different. Representative Peterson's bill was highlighted in Forbes magazine as a new model that other states should be looking at. We're excited for that, and so we're excited for this to play out. So yeah, let's open up questions.
Representative Peterson, just a point of clarification, is your bill, 65 million is taken from all of the universities, colleges and universities collectively, or individually each one?
Yes, great question, Ben. So it's 60 million total, and it ranges. It's based on their instructional line item. So that's about a little over $1 million for Snow College, about 19 million.
Okay, so it's an allocation,
yes,
essentially, but
yes, it creates a target for them.
Which then your bill calls for 65 million.
No.
Yeah.
So are we basically robbing one to feed the other?
That's a really good
Great
question.
question.
No,
No.
2 separate pots of money.
Yes.
So Representative Peterson's bill does not take the money outside of higher education. In fact, it places it in a restricted account inside higher education that then can be reallocated. The money for, my bill comes out of the stabilization account, which is in public, education. So two total separate pots of money.
Yes.
Is it 60 million over the 3 years or 60 million each?
So, what it is it creates a $60 million target, and you have 3 years to get that money reallocated. So it's 60 million, ongoing funding, so, yes.
Talk about why. I think that's important for,
Yeah.
everybody to understand why it's spread over. a
Yeah,
3-year
so
period.
something that's really important is that this is going to take time, right? Because like I said, we have students already enrolled in programs, we wanna make sure they can finish those programs. And that's really important for accreditation and for also just students, you know, that have already made investments in time. And so it's gonna take a little bit of time, to take 3 years to get us there. And it also gives us opportunity for them to come up with their initial plans, to say this is how we're gonna reinvest. And as they learn along the way, that first year and second year, they're gonna have some check-ins with us. And if they need to pivot, they need to make some slight changes from what they thought was gonna be their plan in the first year, they have an opportunity to also learn as they go and work with us on that process.
As you've been overseeing the budget process related to this,
Yeah.
are there going to be job losses at universities and colleges?
There are going to be shifts, there really are. So we have programs right now that have no students enrolled in them. A program with no students enrolled in them, right? And so we wanna make sure that every dollar we're sending to higher education has the most impact it can have.
Representative Peterson, I'm sorry. You voted against House Bill 267. Do you see the compromise measure coming from Senator Dinkins as a viable alternative? And how will you approach this going forward?
So I will say, I would love to see a compromise. I would love the opportunity for everyone to come to the table and continue talking about this.
Speaker, what about you?
Well, we'll see what it looks like. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. I have a hard time with collective bargaining in the state of Utah with public employees because I've seen firsthand how it has a negative effect on our kids in our schools. I've seen firsthand the change inside the UEA over the last several years and more focused around national politics and not what's most important to Utah. And so to me, that's sad. And I don't think unions always have what's best for our kids in mind. We love our teachers. We got a lot of programs that we're working on specifically this year for our teachers. We're gonna have some conversations about that here in a few days or maybe a little bit later in the session. We'll see what happens. But it's important to know that not all unions and not all districts have collective bargaining. There's a lot that don't. And so, you know, it's not a must-have, and teachers and firefighters and policemen will still be able to be represented by the unions, but they just won't have that collective bargaining agreement. And some of the things that we've seen and talked about with Representative Tusher around what happens with those collective bargaining agreements, I don't think is what's best for our kids and the public moving forward. So we'll see. I don't know what'll happen. That bill's in the Senate. You know, I have a rule, I don't like to talk about bills that are in the Senate until they come to the House, and we got enough to focus on. I don't know what the Senate's gonna do with that bill.
So in terms of viability, it sounds like no and yes.
We'll see. I mean, I will say, you know, teachers, firemen, police officers, there are people.
Yeah.
There are people, right? I mean, there are people that we support, we appreciate the work that they're doing, and everyone in the legislature feels
Well,
that way.
I think it's important to know that there's only one city that has collective bargaining for their for their firefighters and for their police officers. That's Salt Lake City. No other city, no other jurisdiction has collective bargaining. So it's not as big of an issue, I think, as most people think it is. And so I don't, you know, I don't know if it's as big an issue. We'll see what the Senate does.
But if it's not as big of an issue and it's one city that's doing it that says that they don't oppose it, why run this bill in the first place then?
Well, again, you kind of come back to what's best. So again, for the citizens, you know, I'd hate to see a day where all police departments or all fire agencies were doing collective bargaining, because you look inside Salt Lake City, I can make a pretty good argument saying what's happening there isn't working, and that's what's best for the citizens. So we want what's best for the citizens, we want what's best for policy and for the taxpayers. So let's go on to another.
Speaking of Salt Lake City, thoughts on Chief Brown's retirement?
Oh, yeah, I don't know exactly what happened there, but we look forward to working closely with Salt Lake City to address some of the concerns. And, you know, I gotta say that it's not just Salt Lake City issue, it's a Salt Lake County issue. in regards to public safety. Look, I think our courts, our judges need to do more to hold people accountable for the decisions they make. Our Salt Lake County needs to not release violent criminals out onto the streets over and over and over again. They need to hold them people inside their jails. They need to find some more jail capacity. We agree with that. We're working together collaboratively with them. And then we also need to work collaboratively with the city to make sure that their police department is enforcing the laws that are, you know, state laws and even city ordinances for that matter. And so I don't know a whole lot of the details around Chief Brown, but we support working together. Mayor Mendenhall came out with a really good plan, most of which we agree with, to work collaboratively together. We're having great discussions. We're excited about that.
Speaker, I wanted to ask about Representative Moss's bill looking at potentially expanding the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Do you have any more specifics on
Yeah.
what you're looking at and,
Yeah.
and where do you fall on that?
Yeah, so Georgia and Arizona have expanded their Supreme Court over the last, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And as our state looks to grow, we need to ask the question, is 5 Supreme Court justices enough? Most states our size have somewhere between 7 and 9 the justices, Supreme Court, 7 to 9. So that's the discussion that we're going to have as we look to transition. This was a big theme last year, right? We're transitioning from a small state to a medium-sized state. And we need to look at policies all across the board, what's best suits the needs for the citizens of the state. So that we'll be looking to have that discussion, so.
Is that bill like a study, a commission? Do you have any idea what kind of he's proposing?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, you start a bill, go through the process, get feedback, see what it looks like. So that bill will be a bill that addresses that. As that bill starts to formulate and comes forward, we'll take the input, and we'll see what happens and where it goes from there. But no, it's not a study. Maybe that's where we end up, I don't know. But I think we know enough now that we want to have that conversation. I think it's a really good conversation to have. Again, most states our size have 7 to 9 justices, so that's a conversation we're gonna have.
What do you say to people who might say that this looks like it could be punishment for disagreeing with some of the Supreme Court's rulings?
Well, I don't know why the courts would have an issue with increasing the size. I mean, you look at the workload and the amount of the complexity of the cases that are in front of them today, and I think more eyes on what they're looking at to help sort through some of these issues, I think is a good thing. So I don't view it as that, but I'm not sure.
And we were told a lot of the backload that these cases are having are in the appellate court level. So how does increasing the Supreme Court address the issue of backload if it's in the appellate court?
Well, I would say it's at both. I said that there's some at the appellate court, but you look at the timing on how long some of these cases are taking to resolve at the Supreme Court level. I mean, abortion, I don't know, where are we going on now, 3-4 years on abortion?
But that's still in the lower court.
No, isn't abortion?
No, the appellate level courts took on the injunction that the state appealed, but the case itself remains, and everything was put on hold while the legislature or the state appealed the injunction.
Well, you even look at the Supreme Court has weighed in on that, on the standing issue, you're right. But you come back to even, some of the cases that the Supreme Court, how long their decisions have taken. And maybe, does this help? Does it slow it down? I don't know. But I think more along the lines of, look, we're moving and transitioning from a small state to a medium sized state. Very few states have 5 Supreme Court justices. Very few states. So.
On that note, does the bill envision any way of how they are selected? I mean, currently we have governor appoints, Senate confirms, that kind of thing. Are you looking to continue that?
Well, I think that's a discussion to have down the road. That's not what this bill does. I think we want to kind of play, see what happens over the next little bit. You look at what other states have done. Some other states have went to, a different process, and actually electing them by the people is something that I've talked about in the past. I don't know that we're ready to have that discussion yet, but let's certainly everything's on the table as we move forward through this process. Maybe we move forward through the process, and that's something that comes up. I think having these discussions is a good thing.
Before we move on, when President Biden suggested adding justices to the Supreme Court, it was decried by conservatives as
Yeah.
court packing.
Well, they've already got 9 justices at the Supreme Court. So again, I come back to 5 Supreme Court justices on a medium-sized state. I think there's only one state our size that has 5 Supreme Court justices. And so we're definitely on the low end, significantly on the low end and so looking at, again, most states have 7 to 9. So I think that's a conversation we have.
Representative Burton's election bill is still circled on the board.
Yeah.
Are you still at loggerheads with the Senate on how to proceed on that, or what's your?
Well, I don't know if we're ever loggerheads with the Senate, right? So.
I've never seen that before. Right, I'm sorry, I
We always
misspoke.
get along, it's great.
No, we have respect for the other chamber. We think our ideas are better. They think their ideas are better. We'll see what happens as we move through the process. You know, I think it's important to note that the Senate hasn't said no to that option, but they've talked about some other options. We're in conversations. What does that look like? And you know, the bill keeps moving through the process. It'll get changed, reformed, and we'll see where it ends up. But I think there's good conversations they're having. I sat down with senators, representatives, and county clerks and the lieutenant governor's office the other day. It was a three-hour meeting the other night, and we had a really good conversation, making sure that we are addressing all the concerns that are out there. So that's the goal, is to make sure that we address the problems and the concerns that are out there. Look, Utah's in the bottom third of the nation as far as states go for secure elections, according to the Heritage Foundation study. And the good thing about that study is they set out a really objective criteria, right? And so we can look and compare and see where, you know, if we make certain changes to make our elections more secure, how can we move up and be in the top third or top quarter? That's what the goal is making sure that people have confidence
Can we
in
ask
our
you
elections.
a question about a very serious topic for a moment?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
gonna be
Far-
the last one though.
Far more serious. When is the Capitol going to get a real cafeteria?
Food trucks, Bob. Just, yeah.
Food trucks.
Well,
I
yeah.
mean, the
Uber
county
Eats.
has one, the city
Uber
has
Eats, yeah.
one, libraries do, bookstores
Right.
do. This is
Yeah.
the people's house. Why doesn't it have a cafeteria?
You know, it did have a cafeteria.
It did.
Yeah.
And it had a hard time, and it rotated through vendors, and no,
Yeah.
people they couldn't make money, and it wasn't.
When all those state employees
Yeah.
moved off of Capitol Hill, when we're all not here in
Yeah.
session, it was very hard for them to make their business work, so.
Yeah.
We'd also love food up here, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So the new state office building's not gonna have one?
Does not have a cafeteria, no.
Cause all those employees are not
Well,
coming
it's
back.
not a, yeah, it's not.
Cause it's
a-
not going to be a state
Right,
office building, right?
right,
Those employees are
yeah.
gonna be in
Yeah.
Taylorsville and
Yeah.
other locations, so we just don't have enough people up here the rest of the year to make it happen.
Shouldn't there be one though for people who come up here all day and they're spending, I mean, really,
Yeah.
not having a cafeteria? You guys eat, you
Yeah.
get to eat,
Yeah.
but the people who come up here don't have a
Well,
place to
I
eat.
think the question is, because right now,
Trying to eat
before.
Please, yeah.
Look,
I got some protein bars in my office, yeah.
If there is a cafeteria, it would have to be subsidized by the citizens of the state through their taxpayer dollars. It's a fair question to ask. Look, it's not very far. We're in the middle of Salt Lake City. You've got Uber Eats delivery. That's how we eat, quite honestly. I mean, we get a lot of food, Uber Eats. You can pick up your phone, dial it up, and have it delivered. So I don't think it's that big a deal to have one or not have one.
City
So I
Creek's
think,
got free parking.
yeah, we got bigger fish to fry than whether or not we got a cafeteria, so.
But
You could fry fish here.
Yeah. There you go. So, okay.
Okay.
Thank you all.